Hi friends, welcome into my home here at Mark's Minis, where this chapter is all about fire. This next model in the series is Son of Muspell, and he's all about fire. I'll take you through my color sequence, which involves Kimera Kolor to give you the maximum pigmentation, the maximum saturation you need for the most blazing hot fire you can get. So strap in and follow along because this guy went fast. Half hour, it's all process, no finesse required. Enjoy. The key to intensely hot and bright flamey flames is saturation. The key to high saturation is high pigmentation. That's why for the hottest, brightest flamey flames, we always go to Kimera Kolors. Now, some people complain that I start with the cold yellow instead of the warm yellow. But from Kimera Kolors, the cold yellow is the most intensely brightest yellow I've ever seen. So highly pigmented, it is a great start for this sequence. This sequence is not what you might expect, so please follow along and you'll see my recipe for the brightest flamey flames I was able to produce. Now we're attacking the model with what seems like dry brushing, but it is really not. The brush is quite moist. There is a high level of humidity in those bristles. But what I found, the key to very smooth and progressive dry brushing is the use of medium. Now, all my friends that are master level artists pretty much shun the use of medium and always lean on water. However, my other friends, being mostly beginner and intermediate painters, know that a nice smooth medium is really helpful in getting the control and smoothness that you want in your dry brushing. Medium adds some transparency, so if you're feeling timid, use a thin blend. If you're feeling bolder about your color choices and control, you can use a thicker blend. The great thing about translucency is that you are showing the underlying layers, which for a flame effect is ideal. Now, you can probably get good results with any name brand acrylic medium. I'm sure you could get used to it and get good results with it. However, I am having a blast using the Glaze medium from Abteilung 502. It is silky smooth, highly dense acrylic medium, matte finish, and it is a joy to work with. It made this damp, dry brushing technique really easy, very forgiving, and highly controllable. During the process, you notice I'm changing brushes. For the final tips of application, I am using a very soft makeup brush, very cheap also. To get into tighter areas, I'm using a smaller, more traditional dry brush. And for larger areas where I don't need as much control, a regular dry brush. The progression of colors I use is cold yellow first, starting light and building up to a solid application of cold yellow. I then slowly introduced some warm yellow into that. So at this point, I'm using a blend of cold and warm yellow. Eventually, I ease into a solid application of warm yellow. I actually skipped the Kimera Kolor orange. I somehow feel it doesn't fit in this sequence. Instead, I started slowly introducing red to the warm yellow, building up to red, and then slowly introducing black at the tips of the flames, eventually touching the final tips of the flames with solid black. Now at this point, I'm just starting to introduce my first little bit of the red. And you have to be careful with the red because it is highly pigmented. It is a very powerful color. So I start out with maybe 10% of the red as I timidly build up towards my darker red colors. This is where we need to be patient, take our time, and build up the deep red coloring that everyone recognizes as flames. We can be patient and we have control because we're using plenty of medium. And of course, as we go through each of these sequence colors, we're trying to cover less and less area each time. We're not very good at it, but we try. It's the medium that makes it forgiving, so if we botch a little bit, it just adds more to the variation of color. Okay, so we've built up our gentle dry brushing, and now we're at a pretty strong mix of the red and the warm yellow. And don't forget, plenty of clear acrylic medium. Now I want to come at it with my needle brush. These things always develop a hook at the tip, so I go through them. But I just want to come in and slash a little flamey-like lines here and there. There are some flat surfaces on this model, and I thought I could add a little bit more flame motif to those. You can be painterly about it because we're using plenty of acrylic medium, and you can see through what we're doing to the layers below. Okay, now we're getting into a very strong blend of the red, and I'm being extra cautious because it is so powerful. If you're too generous with the red, in my view, you're cooling down the model. So I'm being very frugal with the red and letting warm yellow and the underlying cold yellow speak to the heat of what's going on here. After that, I transition to adding a bit of carbon black to the red. I want to be careful with carbon black and make sure it only gets to the extreme extremities of these shapes, and I want to make sure I use it so that it can contrast some other colors to broadcast more intensely the heat. It's hard for an object to be really bright unless it's sitting next to something that's dark. So here's the thing, if you want something to appear as bright, you have to have it next to something that's dark. And another thing is that white is a desaturator. I was tempted to let some of the white show through, but it didn't make any sense. While in real life, white hot metal might be the part of the metal that is broadcasting the most energy, we're using a reflective model here, and it just essentially cooled the model down illogically, counterintuitively. So it turns out the hottest color we can broadcast from our model space is that cold yellow, which immediately looks hotter when we are putting it right next to the warm yellow. And that looks hotter when we mix in the red, etc. All these colors stack, and with the help of the translucency given to us by the medium, it comes out to a pretty nice flame effect. So as I'm going to darker colors and smaller areas, I'm also going to smaller brushes. And now I'm tackling the small, very dark, near black details, still with plenty of translucency from the medium, and I'm coming down and sort of stippling and maybe a bit of dry brushing with the extra small dry brush. Turns out the extra small dry brush is a powerful tool in your arsenal. I've been using it for stippling, and it is extremely effective doing that. So now that I have timidly brought up my black areas where I think they should be, I am now going to be a little bit more bold with the needle brush and come in and add some black touch where I think it needs it most. Mostly the outer extremities. Also, I carefully built up some black using plenty of medium to sort of illustrate the rider's face. Black was the only color I could do it with for obvious reasons, and it came out fine. You can see the rider's face, and you can see his glowing yellow eyes, which is the high contrast between the black and the yellow. A few touch-ups with black, and we're still done in about a half an hour. I fiddled with the base for about another half an hour. I didn't have a plan, but I ended up with what I hope looks like one of the sons of Surt charging in from Muspelheim into Midgard, melting the ice and creating fire as he goes. Speed painting this guy was fast and easy, but creating this video was hard. Please share the love with a subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And if you haven't checked it out yet, here's the epic unboxing where we will preview all the models we're doing in the series. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.